Just because Ole Miss knows how to maximize the current college sports model, that doesn't really mean it's not broken.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Thanks for tuning in today. Today on the show, we talk about Lane Kiffin talking to, honestly, anyone that'll listen about how broken the college football system is right now. We get our first look at Walter Nolen and Ole Miss gear. The 2025 quarterback competition Cold War is currently underway this spring. And I genuinely don't think Caleb Cunningham ends up at Mississippi State after all. Interesting. The Grove Collective is doing their March to Victory campaign this month. What does that mean? Well, it's their new NIL campaign for Ole Miss Athletics, and their hope is to raise $10 million and have 10,000 total members by the end of March. It's a March Madness type competition that puts regions of the U.S. competing for who can give the most, and the Sweet 16 ends March 18th. Let's keep Ole Miss Athletics at the forefront and go to thegrovecollective.com/march to victory to make this happen. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. Honestly, Daquan Wright will be on the show Sunday morning. Tune in for that. These days, it feels like every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So Lane Kiffin is talking to basically everybody right now about how broken college athletics are. And he just wants to drill in how messed up and how broken it is. And he talked to Pete Thamel from On3. He says, Lane Kiffin, who has harnessed the chaos in college football better than anyone else, but he still isn't afraid to call the current situation of the sport a disaster. He said, it probably just sounds strange to a lot of people for me to be saying it's a disaster when we're out here, some would say, maximizing it as well as you can and as well as anybody, Kiffin said. But to me, it tells you how much of a disaster it is. Even though it benefits you, I'm still telling you it's a disaster, even though it benefits us at Ole Miss a lot. And it's being picked up all over the country. This is from MLive. That's up in Michigan, talking about Lane Kiffin, talking about college football's disaster. Lane Kiffin, when he says something, people listen nationally. He gets clicks. The same reason that he's mentioned in every coaching search is the same reason when he talks in this situation, it actually goes out to people. Now, what is a disaster right now? You hear people talk about everything and they like to lump everything together, the transfer portal, the NIL, the whole 9 yards. It's a disaster. It's crazy. And I think it's important to realize that NIL is not playing as a part of this disaster really at all. NIL just changed the way that collectives and things like that had to work. Lane Kiffin is not bitching about that. What has Lane Kiffin upset is roster management. That's it. It's the multiple transfer terms that has Lane Kiffin worked up, has all coaches worked up, because you can't genuinely coach your roster and like really lay into them if you're worried April 15th or December 1st that a player is going to hop up and leave, where you can't count on them in the future. My everydayers can attest to the fact that I have said that the program has long since been dead. The 2008 Urban Meyer Florida teams, they don't exist. Now it's all about the 2024 team, the 2025 team, the 2026 team. There's not really any crossover between them. And any crossover between them is coincidental at best. So it is important for you in this modern state of college football, if everybody wants to listen to how Ole Miss is doing it, this is how Ole Miss is doing it. Ole Miss's brand that they put out, and this is the brand that everybody sees, is fun. It's fun to play there. They do stuff that's a little bit on the lighter side. They don't have a couple of practices. It's fun. Practicing football is not fun. So if you can practice football less, you're going to have an advantage. Ole Miss has one of the best, most efficient collectives in the country. Not the biggest war chest, the most efficient collectives that's completely well run. And they have a football coach that's kind of cool. It's fun, and they have nice facilities. That is how Ole Miss is doing this. There's places like Florida where their collective is a mess. There's places like Mississippi State where their collective is basically non-existent and they're trying to play catch up. There are places with old school style head coaches that is having trouble adapting, like Nick Saban did, because he was a hard-nosed coach and players didn't want to deal with that. The depth drained down a little bit. This is a hard area, and Lane Kiffin is navigating it probably better than anybody in college football. But until the NCAA makes it to where you have a player for more than a 3-month period of time, it's going to be problematic. It's going to be in a situation to where you can't coach. You can't do whatever you're doing. You're doing basically a best version of AAU basketball, essentially at the intercollegiate level. Because the NCAA and the court system has let it be known, and they do this over and over again, when it comes to intercollegiate athletics, they view it no differently than club sports or intramural sports, to where there are no rules. There are no eligibility requirements. There are nothing over there. It's just something that college kids do. The people that are running these multi-million-dollar organizations that college sports, what they became through these arbitrary limits on labor over the course of the years, they're freaking out right now, and they should, because they know how this ends. They know how this is going to look. And it ends essentially with players breaking off as employees, especially the revenue-based sports breaking off as employees and signing contracts for multiple years. Now, we can talk about how eligibility and all of that, that's an arbitrary thing. That's probably would be struck down on the courts as well. So what are we looking at this ending up? This feels like intercollegiate wise, athletics wise, that they're not going to do anything. And the SEC and the Big Ten is eventually going to have to take their ball and go home. And they're going to have to set up a system to where players sign contracts. It's not an eligibility issue to where you have 4 years to play 5. No, it's a situation to where you sign contracts. There's not an arbitrary age limit. There's not a length of which you can stay in school. And there's probably not even a requirement that a player goes to class. And you have to decide as a fan if that is tolerable to you. You have to decide that is it just the physical playing employees playing in a game? Is that better than the students playing the game? Because it's still the laundry. It's still the thing. It's an interesting situation, but the courts have set it up to where that's the level that this is going to go to, and there's nothing the NCAA can do to stop it. So we'll see how it goes. And the irony, like I said, is that Lane Kiffin has navigated this chaos better than any other coach in college football. The fun statue, everything he is set on towards winning is helping him manage this chaos. When other people are struggling, he is thriving. And that is something that honestly needs to be respected. and lets him know that he is probably in really good shape moving forward. Ole Miss wins the national championship this year. That doesn't mean they're going to be really good in 2025. That doesn't mean they're going to be really good in 2026. It just doesn't matter. It's like the Auburn fans that like to put the Winsipedia things in from 2017. That doesn't matter. That right there is the reason your program is struggling, because you think that has any bearing on what happens now. Basically, the reality is in 2021, the college football world changed, and everything that happened before 2021 just didn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. And the longer you think that it matters, the bigger of a hole you will dig for yourself in this modern system that makes it harder to dig your way out of. This NCAA system right now is an absolute disaster. There's no way to get around it. There's also no light at the end of the tunnel, and there's no sign of this being fixed anytime soon. So we're going to complain about the NCAA pretty consistently, but we're also going to be taking advantage of it, and Lane Kiffin is going to be making a solid program in the Ole Miss Rebels for the foreseeable future. We'll see. The 2024 team has a chance to be playoff ready. What does the 2025 team look out like? I don't know. We'll see about that after the 2024 team. So we'll see how that goes as well. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. The quarterback competition of 2025, it's a Cold War, and it's begun. I'll tell you exactly what I mean when we come back in just a second. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences for smart TVs, as well as Fire TV sticks that you can plug into your existing TV that provide access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's the opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created the Fire TV Channels app to deliver constant supplies of the latest videos of your favorite sports brands, all for free. Locked On is all over that. That includes all of us at Locked On and the most big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV Channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. Check out the Fire TV Channels app on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV Channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Locked On has launched its first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. All right, so the NCAA right now is an absolute disaster. Lane Kiffin is telling anybody that will listen that, and we should pay attention to him saying that. So that's the reason we put out there. We learned that this week. The other thing we learned this week is we saw what Walter Nolen looked like in an Ole Miss uniform for the first time. Him and Trey Amos were the pictures that were put out by Ole Miss football over practice. And honestly, you're going to hear from Daquan Wright over the course of Sunday. That video goes live. Daquan Wright says must watch events at practice or whenever they're throwing or anything like that is Trey Harris versus Trey Amos. He said both of them are dudes, and basically whenever people are watching practice, they make sure they see that rep whenever they go against each other because of all the specialness that happens. And we have seen that Trey Harris is a special wide receiver, Trey Amos, if he gives him that much of a thing, it's an iron sharpens iron. And we saw that Ole Miss football put this picture up with that line. And that is because they are really pushing each other right now. They're both number 9. They're both really good players, but Trey Amos has a chance. We told you about his man-to-man coverage ability. He has a chance to be pretty special, him pushing Trey Harris this year. And you can also see Walter Nolen popping up there. Walter Nolen is a big man. He's a large man. He doesn't necessarily look it. He is put together pretty well. And this is another picture of them putting him out there as well. Now, the other part of spring practice that came to fruition essentially was Jaxson Dart is recovering from a procedure that he had in January. He had the procedure in January because he was going to for sure play in the Peach Bowl. That's the reason it got put off. The debate that happened at the beginning of December was whether or not for Jaxson Dart, should they let him have that procedure to be ready for spring? Is the bowl game more important? Than they got the Peach Bowl. And once it was the Peach Bowl, there was no doubt of what was going on. Jaxson Dart absolutely balled out in the Peach Bowl. He is the starting quarterback of this team. No matter what we say over the course of spring, no matter how hyperbolic we get, Jaxson Dart is going to be the quarterback. This is the first time in his Ole Miss career that he hasn't had to deal with a quarterback competition. And we're not going to change that. So don't hear us saying that Jaxson Dart's job is in jeopardy in any way. But with the limits on Jaxson Dart's health at the moment, Walker Howard and Austin Simmons are getting the reps, which means the most anticipated quarterback competition in Ole Miss history, which will be in the spring of 2025, 12 months from now, is in Cold War status as we speak. These reps, you want to get a head start on 2025, get out there and make plays in this spring. When Jaxson Dart can't do team drills, when Jaxson Dart can't do necessarily some 7-on-7 stuff, go in there as Austin Simmons, go in there and Walker Howard and take it to the next level. Now, it's a situation where Ole Miss football put out the picture of Austin Simmons. Now, I'm expecting a picture tomorrow of Walker Howard. I'm not saying that necessarily means anything. Austin Simmons was just the photograph that was taken out of the first day. And everybody knows how I feel about Austin. I think he has a chance to be one of the best athletes that have ever gone through Ole Miss by the time he is done. He is a guy that practiced, and this picture was taken yesterday morning. He went out and pitched that night against Memphis and had a scoreless inning after walking the first batter. He competes. No stage on the baseball field has proven to be too much, which gives me hope for this player once he gets on the football field playing in front of 60, 70,000 people. Walker Howard's a 5-star quarterback. We saw him in the spring game a year ago. He completely balled out. Now, is he going to be the guy that shirks away from the competition? No, he's not. He's a really good football player. That is the reason these two competing are going to be the best quarterback competition as far as the greatest competition in the history of Ole Miss football. I think, my opinion, that Austin Simmons is going to be the one that ends up going. I think Austin Simmons is Tua with 3+ inches. That is what Austin Simmons is. He's an incredibly accurate quarterback, and he's incredibly smooth. But I am not going to discount Walker Howard. He's a 5-star quarterback and a great football player. So they're going to basically start competing right now. Whether or not it's an open quarterback competition and anybody asked that question, no, it's a Cold War right now. It's going to heat up in 12 months, but it's a Cold War right now where Austin Simmons and Walker Howard are jockeying to be in a better situation after Jaxson Dart leaves Ole Miss. So we'll see exactly how this goes. I am so looking forward to this competition, and I think it'll be really, really good for Ole Miss as well. I love spring practice. It doesn't necessarily have to necessarily mean anything. You're playing yourself at the end of it, but it's a situation similar to spring training in Major League Baseball. You don't care the overall big picture results of spring practice. You don't. It's like a win in a spring training game. Oh, you beat the Yankees in a Grapefruit League game. Cool. And it's in a situation like that, the big picture stuff doesn't stand out. The offense and defense, it doesn't stand out. Where you make your money in these spring practices are in the matchups between Trey Harris and Trey Amos, in the matchups between Nate Kalepo and Walter Nolen, in the matchups between Jeremy James and JJ Pegues, in the matchups between Austin Simmons and Walker Howard, in the matchups between Kedrick Reesano and Ulysses Bentley. That competition is what's going to make spring practice worthwhile and why we are paying attention to it. It's also why that the format of the spring game, if that is truly going to be the only football we get to see from Ole Miss this season, that doesn't work. That doesn't work for me. If Ole Miss does a thing like the Pro Bowl games, I will be on here wrecking them for it. I don't care if you run 45 inside zone plays. I want to see 45 inside zone plays. I want to see some simple pass concepts. I want to see Austin Simmons play football. I want to see Walker Howard play football. Is he a little bit better reading the defense? Is he more comfortable after a year in the system? That is what I want to see in the spring game. I do not want to see catching punts in a jugs machine. I do not want to see playing flag football. I could care less about that. There's no way I don't think I would even cut that on, because it doesn't serve any purpose. There is no purpose in those players doing that for me to pay attention and talk about it. Nobody gets any benefit of that. I want some semblance of real football. And right now, most everything is shut down around Ole Miss sports for spring practice. Now, is it the beginning of spring and now they're going to open up like the Saturdays, like the Saturday after spring break, whenever they're back doing their real spring? Are they going to open that up? Maybe. It feels like it. That's what they did last year. They closed everything down and they opened it up, and it was very chaotic, but it worked out. But if they open it up, we have somebody that's going to be in the stadium. If they don't, we're going to watch the Grove Ball on TV. And that's the plan for spring practice. And we'll talk about the competition and the matchups that are happening all over, and we'll continue to try to get players on the show as well. Should be a lot of fun. Still more to come on Locked On Ole Miss, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I don't think Caleb Cunningham ends up at Mississippi State. And I'll tell you why next. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has all the tools necessary to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to those professionals, and you can't find them anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of this while making the process easy and intuitive. And hiring can be easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, and you might not have the resources to hire. So LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. And with 2.5 million small businesses that use LinkedIn for hiring, that is a pretty cool statistic as well. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV with the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Be part of history. Now, we've talked about Caleb Cunningham for a while now, and he visited Ole Miss on Monday, the day after the dead period. And I was listening to the Red and Blue Crew podcast of David Johnson and Brad Logan the other day, and there was something that was brought up. He said that Caleb Cunningham brought up unprompted, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I heard, or at least the best I can remember. He brought up unprompted, Mississippi State has not put any wide receivers into the league, and that Ole Miss has. That means it's on his mind, which means that for him to go to Mississippi State is going to absolutely have to break the bank, which means that Caleb Cunningham would likely be the only big-time player that is there on campus, which I just do not see Mississippi State doing. Now, if you look at collective-wise, if it's an Ole Miss Mississippi State deal, that's not a good situation for Mississippi State. And when you add in collectives, that really isn't a good look for Mississippi State. And when you add in the other 8 teams of Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, Florida State, Miami, those schools, that's bad for Mississippi State as well. So the kid is from Ackerman, and he's a consensus top 25 player in the country. He's ranked 20th consensus nationally, 5-star player. He's a 4-star in all the services. He's ranked as low as 22nd. If you look at the NIL or the RPM, the recruit prediction machine, which is their version of the crystal ball, they've got Mississippi State at 85.9%. And that's mainly because of proximity to Ackerman for Mississippi State, but also knowing how much Mississippi State wants him and how hard they're doing it. And they've gotten a couple of recruit commits or commit prediction machine predictions for them as well. The local predictions are basically uniformly Mississippi State, except for one by David Johnson from the Inside the Rebels that was put in after this past Monday. When the kid brings up the fact, unprompted, like I said, unprompted, that's the key part of this, that Mississippi State hasn't put anybody in the league. That's a problem for Mississippi State. Now, can Mississippi State not overcome that? Yes, they can. Braylon Burnside is at Mississippi State and is actually on video talking about how much they sucked. That happened. So if they can do that, anything can happen. And we are 9 months away from kids being able to sign on the dotted line. There's so much water that has to flow under the bridge. So crystal balls and RPMs, do they matter? No, not really. But are they true as of right now? Potentially. I don't think that when it's all said and done, because of who all is going to recruit this player and who all is going to recruit these players with a reputation of really treating wide receivers at high levels, Mississippi State doesn't have the collective. They don't have the NFL history. I think the last wide receiver that got any meaningful time in the NFL was Eric Moulds. Pratt Rogers did not know who Eric Moulds was. I think Eric Moulds played before Pratt was born. And that's a problem for Mississippi State whenever a wide receiver is coming up right outside there. Interesting stuff. We'll see what's up. This has been the What Have We Learned episode. We do this every Friday during the offseason of football. We do it every Monday during the season. But we talked about the NCAA being an absolute disaster when it comes to roster management. We talked about getting to see Walter Nolen for the first time, and the quarterback competition for 2025 is kind of in a cold war right now. And we also talked about Caleb Cunningham and his visit to Ole Miss. He's going visiting place after place after place, and you'll see his name pop up quite a bit. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Every dayers, we have Daquan Wright slated for this Sunday morning, and we wait for the most anticipated football season at Ole Miss maybe ever, and you can hear about it all right here. But for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find out Locked On Sports Today now available on free Fire TV Channels app. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Hotty toddy, everyone. Have a good weekend.